Good evening, everybody. Akash Inti here with a biotech basics video. So again, the idea of this series is to make sure that we go over the basic concept of biotech so that you're aware of it and you can use these concepts to move more into the consulting field, potentially even start up a biotech company. I'm simply making them more accessible to the general public. So today we talk about types of biotech companies. In my experience, there's a few different types, and we'll start. And again, when we talk about biotech companies, we're talking about a company that uses biology in some way, shape, or form as their technology. So examples of this, as we covered in a previous video, could be anywhere from industrial to healthcare to working in the marine or oceans to agriculture, and so on and so forth. So there's many different areas. I happen to specialize in the medical space. So this is really the healthcare industry and working with how can we use products that are derived from life or from biology to be useful for humans. So we're talking about healthcare companies, healthcare biotech companies. There's two to three types that are really most often you'll see. So one you'll have as a platform company, and I'll get into this a little bit in more detail. The second you'll have as a therapeutic company. And then others are, we'll call them diagnostic companies or tools companies. Things of this nature are at a high level, I consider, at least really what's in the biotech space. And even this section, I'd say, is oftentimes it's its own space. So getting into detail, so platform companies. What is a platform company? So when we say a platform company, what we're referring to is a type of company that uses some baseline technology to make multiple therapeutics, drugs, agents, whatever you want to call it, but drug candidates, I'd say, or therapeutic candidates. Really, these are potential new drugs that their purpose is to either cure a particular disease or address the symptoms of a particular disease. So it's really important to be aware of this is kind of what a platform company will do. A platform company, what they'll do is they'll make sure that this platform designs or is able to quote unquote discover new drugs that may have some type of these drugs may be useful in disease to cure disease, or as I mentioned, to treat the symptoms. From there, oftentimes each of these therapeutics, they'll either be branched off and a new company will form out of each one of these, or what may happen is that a portfolio of these put together may compose a new type of company. And these types of companies are known as therapeutics companies. Now, these companies, again, if we're using the analogy of my hand, the platform company is kind of where everything originates. It's the factory where you're designing the drug itself, the agent, the therapeutic, and then each finger is kind of like its own therapeutic candidate itself, or a lead candidate is what we'll call it. And they have their potential to be their own drug or therapeutic itself. So they may be packaged together, and this might be a portfolio of drugs. This might be a portfolio of drugs, these three. And again, the reason why we might want to package them up is because each time a drug gets more information discovered about it through research and development, there's a possibility that the research that's being conducted shows that your drug wouldn't work for what you want, for what you think it may work for. In other words, your hypothesis for this drug, or your best guess as to what this drug may be, the research may prove counter to that hypothesis, and thus it may negate your whole idea of, well, this drug treats this particular disease, or this drug addresses these particular symptoms of a disease. So these at a high level are the two types of companies: platform companies and therapeutic companies. Again, we can have them illustrated as the fingers in this example. From here, we use these, we package them together again because it's very risky to develop new drugs. So let's say if you take 3 shots on goal, so like let's say you have a 1 in 10 chance of this one drug working, another 1 in 10 chance of this drug working, and another 1 in 10 chance of this drug working. The only reason you use 1 in 10 is because it's a nice number. The numbers are typically more so in like the single digits or like point something single digits or 0.0 something single digits. So long story short, many drugs will fail. More often than not, I'd say like maybe 1 in probably 1,000 drugs, maybe or a couple in 1,000 are really the ones that are able to move on. And then when I say move on, I mean make it to the market. So 10, 10, 10. If you combine these together, you have if we put all 3 of these drugs together, you have a 10% chance of this one working, a 10% chance of this one working, and a 10% chance of this one working. So for any one of these 3 to work, you have a 30% chance total, right? So 1 in 10 plus 1 in 10 plus 1 in 10, a 30% chance. Versus if you only took one of these, you'd only have a 10% chance. So when you package these drugs together, when you say you want to put multiple drugs in a portfolio, you have a better chance overall in this whole thing together to make money or to make it to the market. And let's assume that each of these drugs has a 10% chance of making, just for simplicity's sake, let's say $1 million. So you have, if you multiply 1 times 10%, you get $100,000. So this drug is worth potentially $100,000, and I can explain the whole rationale as to why are we doing this whole 10% times what each of these is worth. It's an expected value calculation. We can get into this more in detail, but this is really the best way of kind of coming to some idea as to, well, I don't know if it's going to be a positive result or a negative result, so I'm going to say what's the expected value of this result. This is a game theory concept, and based on that, I'll use that to make my calculations. So together, you'd have 300,000 as your expected value here, versus if you were to only do one, you'd have 100,000, right? So it's easier. You have a better expected value. In other words, you have more. It's a decision that makes more sense because the payouts overall are higher than the consequences. In short words, I guess. So this is what a therapeutic company will be. Oftentimes it's one of these, but increasingly so, it makes more sense for companies to have multiple assets or in their pipeline. And pipeline refers to how many drug candidates are there, drug candidates or therapeutic candidates, agents. How many candidates do they have, or shots on goal is another way of thinking about it, to quote unquote make it, or to hit that maybe $1 million. And again, understand that $1 million is really, really small for drug sales. In the industry, particularly in the pharma industry, they're really looking at billions of dollars. When they say billions of dollars, they mean that billions of dollars, like $1 billion in 1 year. So you can break that down as to, well, how much do they have to make every single quarter or every single month or what have you. That's a fun exercise there in and of itself to just to go and show it and see yourself, whoa, this is how much they're making per period of time, and there's a lot to it. So this is why. So again, this is the types of companies that we're looking at. So a platform company and a therapeutic company. Therapeutic companies are often seen as more valuable within the industry, actually. And you'd be at first like, well, why would that be more valuable than a platform? This thing could spit out a bunch of these guys versus this is just one shot on target, right? Well, the reason why these are really, really valuable is because each of these could be $1 billion, or it could be hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. I mean, each of them, it's highly risky, yeah, but the reward that you get out of it is just huge, absolutely insane. So again, as we talked about, $1 billion molecules are kind of what the industry's been looking for. Historically, we'll see. It's not uncommon to see drugs put out $2 to $3 billion a year. And really in the early 90s and early 2000s, some of these drugs are doing tens of billions. I think just about tens of billions of dollars at the peak. So really, these drugs are really they bring in a lot of revenue for the biotech or pharmaceutical company, and so that's why these are more valuable than the platform itself. As we go out, so actually the hand is a really good tool for this. So as we go out, so like let's say a drug is being researched and we find we're slowly starting to get a lead. So we do more and more research and we find a lead. So maybe at the bottom of your pinky or the bottom of your finger is where we've developed a lead. Well, now you have to move on to different stages in order to get to the market itself. So you do so up to here our lead, and then we're going to enter phase 1. So phase 1 is going to be between your between here and here. I guess your first knuckle and your second knuckle. Or your first knuckle. And so this is like phase 1 trials, and we've talked about this in a past video. Phase 1 trials are trials that are assessing safety. Then you move on to phase 2. In phase 2, you are studying efficacy. And then phase 3 is the trials that looks at efficacy and safety just in larger populations. So as you go out farther and farther, you get to a marketed drug, and this is where you're making all your money. This timeline is really long. So I think I may have alluded to this in a past video, but really it takes 10 years, 15 years to develop a drug from from figuring out just the lead itself or starting studies around there, going all the way to marketing it. This is the other reason why it's highly costly, not only in terms of the amount of money that you need to invest into these types of companies, particularly the therapeutic companies or a platform itself, but really also the time it takes is years and years and years to really make sure that your platform technology works really well, and then that you are able to identify a lead. So those are some differences between platform companies and therapeutic companies, equally valuable and necessary for the industry. And again, this is really around the therapeutics industry. I didn't even talk about diagnostics or tools or things of this nature. Very briefly, I'll fly over it, but this is not an area of expertise of mine. So diagnostics refers to an agent, or it's an agent overall, something that you can use to diagnose a disease, a condition, etc. In other words, you test maybe for a particular type of protein within your blood or maybe in your urine. And based on this, you can see if like a particular type of proteins levels in your blood are high or they're low. This may suggest that you have some type of disease. So a really great example of this is diabetes. When they test the blood of diabetics, what they find is that your sugar levels, your blood glucose levels, are typically usually high, a lot higher than the normal or the quote unquote on the average person. But they also may test their blood and find that their blood insulin levels are low. So these are different markers, and these markers are called biomarkers. In other words, a marker that is related to your biology or your life within you, that suggests a particular type of condition. And this condition manifests in different ways in terms of different symptoms or kind of a presentation, a physical presentation of a condition, or a biophysical presentation, because it's really in your biology, of a condition. So with diabetics is that they the biomarker here would either be insulin or glucose, and they'll measure these to get a sense of that. Okay, since these levels are altered or they're modified, they're not at average levels. We're going to assess, or we're going to, and we know that these levels, these biomarker levels, are associated with your disease. In other words, that when you have this particular type of biomarker within that's either higher or lower, that it relates that you have a particular type of condition or disease. Well, this is what diagnostics companies do, is they'll be the types of they'll create technologies that enable you to measure these types of things. And a great example of this that you guys may have heard of was Theranos. So Theranos was a blood company, blood testing company, where they had the promise of really reshaping the blood testing industry itself, or the diagnostics industry within blood. What they would do is typically how it kind of works now is that you get blood, maybe about I don't know, a vial of it. I don't know what the exact measurement of it is. You get this drawn, and then they run a bunch of tests on it. They spin it through a centrifuge. It separates out your red blood cells from your white blood cells from your platelets, and then they do different tests on these just to measure, well, this is how many platelets you have, this is how many white blood cells you have, red blood cells you have, and so on and so forth. What this company did with Theranos, their whole thing was like, we'll just prick your finger and we'll get one drop of blood, and we'll use that one drop of blood and we'll be able to figure everything else out. As you know, Theranos did not end up becoming a company that was, they had a huge scandal around that they defrauded investors and that their whole technology never worked. So all to say, that's kind of what diagnostics are, is they're tools or technologies that are used to diagnose disease. Tools companies are really for kind of R&D science itself. So this could be kind of your little pipettes. It could be the person or the company that makes the centrifuge. It could be the company that makes the glassware that you use. It could be the company that makes the bioreactor. And I know I'm throwing a lot of technology or terminology right now at you, and we'll go into those in a little bit more detail in a future lecture, but that's kind of what a tools company is. So again, just really high level recapping, what did we talk about today? We talked about platform companies, and we talked about therapeutics companies, and this is all in the silo or the subsector of therapeutics themselves. And we talked about what's the differences between them, what's the similarities between them, how are they related. We also talked about what's the difference in terms of valuations between these two. How does a kind of, we didn't talk about how, but we touched on it, is what's the change from a platform company to a therapeutic company. We talked about portfolios a little bit and some high level portfolio theory. And we talked a little bit about the timeline of these and why and what makes drug development so costly. So you got any questions, throw them in the comment section. Always happy to explain it in a bit more detail. Lastly, I'm going to leave you on this. High five or a hand is a really good tool for explaining drug development, because you've got your platform here, and your platform continues to grow out, and as it continues to grow out towards the fingers, you hit the market. So this is what I leave with you guys. I hope you guys are doing well, and keep up with adding more commentary, interacting, engaging, asking questions, because this is how you learn things. And if there's anything I know how to do in life, it's how to have fun while learning and coming up with entertaining stories of different topics that you can talk about relating to biotech and finding different ways to talk about them. All to say, see ya.